What are the implications for the global south of China's emergence as a digital superpower? In this short video, I'm going to present some findings and future research priorities from a literature review on the topic. A number of cross-cutting themes emerge from the literature, and I will identify 5 here. There's a stereotype of Team China, with all of the stakeholders pointing in the same direction. Some evidence supports this, e.g. around collaborations between the state and tech firms with loans and lines of credit only for use to buy Chinese digital goods and services. Evidence of tensions has been much more limited, with just a few anecdotes about inter-firm competition or differing objectives between state and business. External PR for initiatives such as the Digital Silk Road emphasises mutual win-win between China and Global South countries, but internal statements focus largely on benefits for China. In practice, there's that tied aid model which channels funds to Chinese tech firms, or in e-commerce we can find an asymmetrical model that has helped develop Chinese manufactured goods exports, but mainly primary product imports from the Global South. China is keen to project an image that differentiates its approach to digital development from that of the West, but many features of state strategy actually look quite familiar. Beyond the big picture of strategy, there's been little research about the more micro level of the design, development and implementation of Chinese digital projects in the Global South. Does this present a valuable South-South cooperation model, or a problematic divergence from the principles for digital development? In terms of impact, we see a delivery of economic and political benefits for China, a likely delivery of economic and political benefits for recipient countries in the South, but with few well-researched examples, and a whole set of concerns. Talked up by Sinophobic researchers and talked down by Sinophilic researchers, the concerns include data security and sovereignty, control over digital infrastructure, dependency and vulnerability to Chinese state leverage, digitally enabled inequalities both between and within countries, and environmental impact. One particular area of concern is surveillance systems. Rhetoric in US origin literature about China exporting digital authoritarianism seems to run well ahead of evidence, to ignore many Western nations exporting surveillance systems to the Global South, and to ignore that demand pull from the Global South dominates supply push. But one should not swing too far the other way. China is now the South's primary surveillance supplier, and the relationship between Chinese firms and Chinese state is not an exact mirror of Western equivalents. So that leads to the first of 6 elements for a future research agenda. This one can be summed up as a need for more Southern voices, more researchers from and based in the Global South, a much greater emphasis on original empirical research undertaken in the South, and within that empirical research, a much greater space for stakeholders from the Global South to be heard. Whatever the specific topic, future work needs to steer the difficult line between sinophilia and sinophobia, and between sino-exceptionalism, that sees China as particular and different to other countries, for either better or worse, and sino-identicalism, that sees China as exactly the same as the West. The focus for China's digital expansion has changed over time, beginning back in the 1990s with Telecom Infrastructure, then adding devices in the 2000s, and then adding web services and platforms on top from the 2010s, with some limited direct moves into supporting local institutions of digital governance. Research always lags practice, so work on telecom infrastructure dominates the literature to date. This leaves a set of more recent activities so far empirically under-researched, including emerging technologies such as AI, Internet of Things, autonomous vehicles, and more. As I mentioned earlier, evidence to date about the relationships shown in this diagram between Chinese tech firms and state agencies, specifically focusing on the Global South, is largely speculative and needs investigation. The literature has a fair bit to say about the differential positions of China and of the West on issues such as internet governance, data governance and digital trade. But very largely the characterisation of Global South actors in these domains is neo-colonial and marginalising. Those actors are cast as ciphers or pawns in the great game between the US and China. And so new research is needed to put local actors and agency centre stage, analysing the role of local officials in negotiating deals, for example, the extent of their ability to play off and select between Western and Chinese actors, analysing the role of US-China tensions and of Global South members within international forums, from the ITU to ICANN to the Internet Governance Forum, and researching the role and strategy of local digital companies when Chinese big tech rolls into town. Lastly, balanced and empirical evaluation of the impact of China's digital expansion is needed at two levels. At the meso level of cost-benefit evaluation of individual systems to understand the socio-economic impact of data centres, e-commerce platforms, smart city systems and more. And at the more immanent or structural macro level to understand the broader implications of engagement with Chinese state and private digital actors, especially political and geopolitical and macro financial impacts around contested issues such as realignments in local polities, local labour markets, local technological capabilities, debt and the like. If you'd like to know more about both issues and research agenda, then please take a look at our paper, China's Digital Expansion in the Global South, Systematic Literature Review and Future Research Agenda, published in a special issue of the journal, The Information Society.